All right. Welcome, everybody. Sefer Shelf Team, Hilchot Melachim for Chapter 11. Did this the other day with the group. There was someone who wasn't able to make it, asked for the recording, but I didn't record it, so I'm going to do it again. Um, in setting this up, let's go into the settings screen. And it looks like there's a way to live stream the meeting. Twitch and a YouTube channel. As far as I know, I don't do any of that stuff. So if you are aware, if these meetings are being live streamed anywhere, put it in the comments. Let me know. I don't have a Twitch account. I pretty much just put this on YouTube. So if you find out this is being live streamed or uploaded somewhere other than YouTube, let me know so that I can be aware of it. But we're going to go to Laws of Kings, chapter 11, and I'm going to read it out of the physical copy. Physical copy. Because there's a lot of commentary in here. I went through probably 90% of it in the live class. Since I just did it the other day, I'm going to try and go through it quicker and cut a lot of that. But there is some stuff in here that I'd like to go over. And there was one important part that I missed, so I want to make sure to include that. Um, so we'll see if I can bounce back and forth between the screen sharing, reading on the screen, and reading out of the physical copy, which I prefer to do because that has a lot more commentary than we'll find on here. So we'll see how that works out. Okay, try and do it quickly. In the future, the Messianic king will arise and renew the Davidic dynasty, restoring it to its initial sovereignty. He will build the temple and gather the dispersed of Israel. By the way, this topic here, this is Rambam's view of mashiach, the messianic era. What's he going to do? What's it going to be like? Okay, and already we have commentary here that he did not choose to conclude Hilchot Melachim and the entire Mishnah Torah with the subject of Mashiach merely to conclude with reassuring prophecies of the future redemption. In his preface to the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam explained that his goal in the composition of the work was to summarize and outline the observance of all the mitzvot. Similarly, as explained in Halakha 410, the king's purpose and intent shall be to elevate the true faith and fill the world with justice, i.e., to spread the observance of Torah and mitzvot. The coming of Mashiach represents the most complete expression of these goals. As the Rambam explains in this and the following halachot, Mashiach will rebuild the temple and restore the observance of all the mitzvot, which cannot be fulfilled at present. Hence, a description of his coming serves as an appropriate summation for Hilchot Melachim. So then, this is talking about future days, days we're not in this era. Okay. Then, in his days, the observance of all the statutes will return to their previous state. We will offer sacrifices, observe the sabbatical and the jubilee years according to all their particulars, as described by the Torah. Okay, the Sanhedrin 51b states that halakha applies in the Messianic age to imply that only then will the observance of all the Torah's laws be renewed. Right now, we don't have a temple, so we can't do some of these laws. It mentions here the sabbatical, where the land must be left fallow, throughout the world, all debts are remitted, and the Jubilee, where all the laws of the sabbatical year apply. In addition, slaves are released and property reverts to its original owner. This is the Jubilee, which, like we talked about the previous week in the Noahide scam part 4, we don't accept Ger Toshadim, Noahides, unless we have Yovel and we're observing the Jubilee. Then, when the Jubilee in the future, in this Messianic era, then we'll have a Sanhedrin that will declare the Jubilee is back on. Then, as a result of that, they'll declare that we are once again allowed to accept Ger Toshadim, Noahides, that follow the 7 laws. So we don't have that. But in the future, we will. Okay? According to all their particulars as described by Torah, according to scriptural law, the laws governing the sabbatical and jubilee years must only be observed when the entire Jewish nation is living in the land of Israel. Thus, after the exile of the 10 tribes, these mitzvot were no longer applicable. With the cessation of the observance of the jubilee year, many other mitzvot, laws of Hebrew servants, consecrated property, also ceased. Similarly, the agricultural laws regarding the produce, the teruma, the tithes are also only obligatory according to scripture law when the entire Jewish people live in the land of Israel, which we don't have. We don't control all the borders, including the Jews and the non-Jews within those borders. Anyone who does not believe in him or does not await his coming denies not only the statements of the other prophets, but those of the Torah and Moses, our teacher. The Torah testified to his coming, as Deuteronomy 30 states. God will bring back your captivity and have mercy upon you. He will again gather you from among the nations. Even if your diaspora is at the ends of the heavens, God will gather you up from there and bring you to the land. These explicit words of Torah include all the statements made by the prophets. All right, where were we in this commentary? So we know none of the other prophets can be compared to Moses. He was the greatest. So I think this is where it was saying that he doesn't need to go into the books of the Nevi'im because it's clear there. So he's trying to make the point that the Torah is talking about this. That when he'll bring us back from our captivity, no matter where the diaspora is, no matter where in the diaspora we are, that he'll gather us up. And so he's saying that the Torah here is talking about the Messianic age. I don't think that's so clear from Torah. But there's a commentator that believes that's what it's saying. Okay, it's basically just making the point that Moses' prophecies are greater than those that we're going to find in the Nevi'im. Torah testified to his coming, Deuteronomy 33 through 5. Okay, Sanhedrin 99a records an opinion which states that there will be no individual messianic redeemer for the Jewish people. Rather, God himself will redeem them. However, the majority of the sages rejected that opinion, nullifying it to the point that a person who denies Mashiach based on that opinion denies the entire Torah. This is according to the Chatam Sofer. So we see Sanhedrin 99 records that there's multiple opinions on this. I looked it up once. We talked about it in an earlier class. We actually read it. I don't know if it was Sanhedrin 99 or if it was another spot, but there's opinions that say Mashiach already came. He's not coming. It's supposed to just be a perpetual thing that we're always waiting for. But this concept that one who rejects this opinion that God Himself will just read it again so it's clear. Sanhedrin 99a records an opinion in which states that there will be no individual messianic redeemer for the Jewish people. Rather, God Himself will redeem them. However, the majority sages rejected that opinion, nullifying it to the point that a person who denies Mashiach based on that opinion denies the entire Torah. This is a bold claim by the Hatam Sofer, who lived in the 1800s and the 1900s. So somebody who lived in the 1900s can say that anyone who goes by this opinion in the Talmud denies the entire Torah. I disagree with that. I don't think we have to blindly follow to that extent. Okay. These explicit words of Torah include all the statements made by all the prophets. Though the prophets speak about Mashiach in greater detail, the essential message of the messianic redemption that Mashiach will usher in an era in which Torah and mitzvot can be fulfilled in a complete manner is implied by the Torah's statements. Okay. And that's where we left off. Reference to Mashiach also made in the portion of Bilam, who prophesies about two anointed kings. The word Mashiach literally means anointed one. The first anointed king, David, as mentioned in Halakha 1:7, Saul was also anointed with the unique oil designated for this purpose. Nevertheless, there was a fundamental difference between the anointment of David and that of Saul. Saul was only anointed from a cruse of oil, while David was anointed from a horn, implying that his dynasty would continue forever. David, who from his descendants, in his commentary to the Mishnah describing the 13 principles of faith, the Rambam writes, included in this principle, the belief that Mashiach is that there is no king in Israel except for the descendants of David and Solomon. Okay, so this is just saying Mashiach ben David, the Mashiach will be a descendant of King David. And save Israel in the end of days. See, this is what I'm talking about. It's hard to follow along the screen than the physical copy, because if you see here, it's not bringing up the commentary that I have in the book. See, some of these, it'll bring up commentary, but right here, end of days, we have an important commentary in the book that we don't find here on the website, which is why I prefer the book. In the manuscripts and uncensored texts of the Mishnah Torah, the phrase from the descendants of Esau is substituted for the latter expression. The latter expression being the end of days. So when it's talking about the manuscripts, it's talking about the Yemenite manuscripts, which is going to be the most authentic. And it's an uncensored, which means this has been censored by people in the printed version, which is what we're seeing here on the screen. So the phrase from the descendants of Esau is substituted for the latter expression, which means this should read, the final anointed king who will arise from his descendants and save Israel from the descendants of Esau. A physical group that we're fighting with, that we're at war with, that he's going to bring peace in the land from this group. That passage, Numbers 24, states, I see it, but not now. This refers to David. I perceive it, but not in the near future. This refers to the Messianic king. A star shall go forth from Jacob. This refers to David. A staff shall arise in Israel. This refers to the Messianic king. crushing all of Moab's princes, again, a specific group of people. This refers to David. Samuel relates he smote Moab and measured them with a line, decimating all of Seth's descendants. This refers to the Messianic king, whom Zechariah prophesies he will rule from sea to sea. Edom will be demolished. This refers to David. As Samuel states, Edom became the servants of David. Seir will be destroyed. This refers to the Messianic king. As Obadiah prophesies, saviors will ascend Mount Zion to judge the mountain of Asa. All right, I think there's a lot of commentary here. So let me see if I can go back and find anything worth pointing out. So I perceive it, but not in the near future. This refers to the Messianic king. These two phrases refer to the very existence of David and Mashiach. 21. A star shall go forth from Jacob. This refers to David. Okay, Devarim Rabbah. This is Midrashim, according to Deuteronomy, interprets this verse as a reference to the Mashiach. Similarly, the Jerusalem Talmud explains that Rabbi Akiva gave Bar Kokhba his name because of this verse. And we're going to see there's people out there who say Mashiach is going to be performing miracles. This is not Rambam's opinion. He quotes Rabbi Akiva's view of Bar Kokhba, who he thought could be the Mashiach, and nobody expected Bar Kokhba to perform miracles. At least Rabbi Akiva did. He makes this argument. Okay, a star is often used for direction and a staff employed to prod sheep to follow the proper path. Thus, the two phrases refer to the activities of David and Mashiach to guide the people to a more complete performance of Torah and mitzvot. To quote Halacha 4, he will compel all of Israel to walk in the way of Torah and to reinforce the breaches in its observance. And this is the goal for the Messianic era, according to Rambam. Is just there's going to be a political leader who's going to preside over Israel, and a state of peace will be allowed to study Torah in peace and not be at war. And the verse continues, he made them lie down on the ground. Those he measured, 2 lines were to be executed. Those measured with 1 line he kept alive. It's referring to this one here. Move on to Halakha 2. Similarly, and you see on this word similarly, there's no commentary, but we've got a whole paragraph of commentary just on the word similarly. So let's read that. The Rambam's intention is not merely to cite another proof that Mashiach will come, but rather to demonstrate that he will enable the Jews to observe Torah and mitzvot in a more complete manner, just as we see that Mashiach will enable the Jews to fulfill the mitzvah of establishing cities of refuge in the more complete manner than observed previously, so too he will bring the observance of all the mitzvot to consummate the fulfillment. All this just from the first word similarly. And then I see another one that I guess I skipped over. I'll just read it. It says, the prophecy continues, and the sovereignty shall be God's. These phrases relate how David and Mashiach will crush all opposing forces to the extent that no one will disturb the Jews from their fulfillment of Torah and mitzvot. Again, just a normal person presiding over some battles that lead us to a time of peace. Okay. Um, okay, so similarly with regards to the cities of refuge. Um, so Jews who inadvertently kill somebody. For example, if you're on a roof, you drop a hammer. There's no malice, there's no intent to kill anyone, but it could have been prevented if you tie the string from your hammer to your belt. It could have saved it. So there's cities of refuge for these people to go. We call it like manslaughter today in America. This is something that in a time when we're allowed to have Noah hides, Ger Shab, we don't extend to them. They're not allowed to seek shelter in these cities, um, but Jews are. So similarly, with regard to the cities of refuge, where a person who inadvertently kills a colleague must seek asylum, you must add three more cities. This command was never fulfilled. God did not give this command in vain. So hence, we may assume it is to be fulfilled in the Messianic age. Okay, the Arizal questions the need for cities of refuge in the Messianic age. Then God will cause the spirit of impurity to depart from the earth, and nation will not lift the sword against nation. If so, why will there be a need for cities of refuge at all? And in particular, more cities of refuge than existed previously. The question can be answered based on a passage from Yoma 80a. The Talmud relates how after Rabbi Ishmael inadvertently committed a sin, he recorded in his notebook, when the temple is rebuilt, I will bring a succulent sin offering. Similarly, the cities of refuge in the Messianic age will serve as an asylum for those who killed inadvertently in the previous era. So this is saying his answer, the Rizal's answer is for those who killed it accidentally before the coming of Mashiach in this Messianic era. That's why we'll have the cities. If you're alive in this time when we get to see this era ushered in. Because if we didn't have all the cities set up, then it can't be that God promised that you're going to have this and we didn't see it come to fruition. So therefore, it must be that it's going to happen later. Because we didn't see it happen yet, it's going to come in the future. Another answer could be that it was conditional. You'll see these borders and this amount of cities if you keep the Torah and mitzvot. These are the things that I'm willing to do for you. Fortunately, we didn't keep them. We've been exiled multiple times. So it could be that it was just conditional, and this is why we never expanded the borders to what was promised. But the Arizal is saying, no, it's definitely going to happen. And since it didn't happen yet, it must mean that it's going to happen. So different opinions on it. All right, where were we? There's no need to cite proofs from the works of the prophets, for their books are filled with mention of this matter. So we're quoting stuff from Torah here. He's not going into the Nevi'im because it's filled with this, so there's no need to go there. So that's why he's quoting Torah here, saying it's pretty obvious if you continue reading in the Nevi'im to find it. So he doesn't need to spend time on it right now. Got to get a mouse. It's much easier to work with. Just finished two. One should not presume that the Messianic king must work miracles. And wonders. One should not presume that the Messianic king must work miracles and wonders, bring about new phenomena in the world, resurrect the dead, or perform other similar deeds. This is definitely not true. Okay, now you've heard everybody say this is one of Rambam's 13 principles. You have to believe in resurrection of the dead. You have to believe in Mashiach. But as we're going to see, a lot of these people that are telling you what their belief of Mashiach is are the same people telling you you're not allowed to disagree with Rambam's 13 principles. One of Rambam's 13 principles is that you have to believe in Mashiach, but their version of Mashiach is very different than Rambam's version of Mashiach. But they'll tell you you have to believe in Rambam's 13 principles. And one of them is belief in resurrection of the dead. But let's look at what it says here. Okay, we have commentary after the word dead. So one should not presume that the Messianic king must work miracles and wonders, bring about new phenomena in the world, resurrect the dead. Although the Rambam includes the resurrection of the dead as one of the 13 principles of faith, he maintains that this miracle will not take place in the first stages of the Messianic age, but in a later era. Moreover, the resurrection will not be a miracle worked by the Mashiach individually, but a change brought about by God. Hilchot Teshuvah, chapter 9 and 10, and the commentary to chapter 12, halacha 1 and 2. Okay, so or perform other similar deeds. You do not need to believe in the resurrection of the dead or perform similar deeds. Here it says the Yemenite manuscripts, which is always going to be more accurate. The Yemenite manuscripts of the Mishnah Torah continue as the fools say. So if you were reading the Yemenite manuscript, you would see one should not presume that the Messianic king must work miracles or wonders, bring about new phenomena in the world, resurrect the dead, or perform other similar deeds as the fools say. This was so offensive to somebody that they edited out. But this is Rambam, what he wrote in the manuscripts. So you see, Rambam is not just saying, okay, well, they have this view and I have this view, so I'm neutral on it. You believe that, I'll believe this. He's actually saying the people that have that view should actually be ridiculed. He's calling them fools. And what does the next sentence say? This is definitely not true. Okay. The identity of Mashiach will not be determined by miracles and wonders, but rather, as explained in the following halacha, by his ability to lead the Jewish people to a more complete observance of Torah and mitzvot. Proof can be brought from the fact that Rabbi Akiva, one of the greater sages of Mishnah, was one of the supporters of King Bar Koziba, also known as Bar Kokhba. His name was Shimon Bar Koziba. He adopted the name Bar Kokhba because of the prophecy, a star shall go forth from Jacob. And he would describe him as the Messianic king. He and all the sages of his generation considered him to be the Messianic king until he was killed because of his sins. Bar Kokhba led a revolt against the Romans. At first, he was successful, but ultimately, the force of the Roman military might turned the tide against the Jews. Gradually, they reconquered Eretz Israel, isolating Bar Kokhba's forces in the city of Batar. On Tisha B'Av, Batar fell and hundreds of thousands were slain, causing a national tragedy equivalent to the destruction of the temple. Once he was killed, they realized he was not the Mashiach. The sages did not ask him for any signs or wonders. Okay. The Ravad does not accept this statement. He cites Sanhedrin 93b, which states that the sages tested Bar Kokhba to see if he possessed prophetic intuition. When he could not demonstrate this quality, they had him killed. The difference of opinion between Rambam and the Ravad revolves around a greater issue. In the following chapter, the Rambam writes, do not presume that in the Messianic era, the nature of the world will change. There will be no difference between the current age and the Messianic era, except the emancipation from our subjugation to the Gentile kingdoms. The Ravad, on the other hand, does not accept this viewpoint and argues that Mashiach will initiate a miraculous era in which the nature of the world will change. See the commentary to those halachot. Their debate concerning the nature of the Messianic era is reflected in their conception of Mashiach himself. The Ravad sees him as one who must perform wonders, while the Rambam sees him as a leader of the Jewish people who will restore their independence and motivate them to a more complete Torah practice. This is my view of it as well, along the Rambam's view. The main thrust of this matter is the Torah, its statutes, and its laws are everlasting. We may not add to them or detract from them. The intent of this halacha, and surely these lines, is to negate the concept shared by the Christians and other false messianic movements that after Mashiach's coming, the observance of these mitzvot will be nullified. This is what makes Christianity problematic. Is they say that the Torah is nullified now, even though the Torah says this is for all generations. They come along and say, no, no, this is no longer applicable. This concept is emphasized by the following lines taken from the Yemenite manuscripts of the Mishnah Torah that were stricken from the printed text by the censor. Anyone who adds or detracts or reveals false interpretations of the Torah to imply that the mitzvot are not to be understood simply is surely wicked and a non-believer. Yeah, this brings us to Halakha 4 now. If a king will arise from the house of David who diligently contemplates the Torah and observes its mitzvot as prescribed by the written law and the oral law as David, his ancestor, implied in this statement is that Mashiach will be born through natural means, grow up and mature as a Torah sage, careful in his observance of the mitzvot, compels all of Israel to walk in the way of the Torah and rectify the breaches in its observance, and fights the wars of God. The uncensored printings of the Mishnah Torah include the phrase, defeating all of the nations around him, thus removing the immediate obstacles to the Jews' observance of Torah and mitzvot. We may, with assurance, consider him to be the Mashiach. So we'll know he's the Mashiach when he achieves the goal. If he succeeds in the above, builds the temple. The Rambam source for this is the Jerusalem Talmud and Megillah 1 and Bamidbar Rabbah 13:2. In contrast, Rashi and Tosafot maintain that the third temple is the sanctuary of God established by your hands. It's already completely built and is waiting in the heavens to be revealed. It's possible to resolve these two opinions. Bamidbar Rabbah states that the gates to the temple were not destroyed by our foes. Rather, they sank into the earth and will emerge when the Mashiach comes. Thus, when the temple descends from heaven, Mashiach will connect to its gates. Bava Batra 53b relates that a person who fixes the doors to a building is considered as if he constructed. Okay, so people in the Rashi camp, they think that the doors sank into the ground. The rest of the temple was built in heaven, and it's going to come down. The gates are going to come out of the ground. Mashiach is going to attach. Rambam's view, which makes more sense to me, is that we'll know this guy is Mashiach when he achieves the goal, when he oversees the building of the temple, the rebuilding of it. This is something that we can envision seeing in our lifetime with our own eyes. It doesn't involve miraculous things coming out of the ground and coming down from heaven. So that's a much more rational approach to me. If he succeeds in the above, builds the temple in its place, and gathers the dispersed of Israel, he is definitely the Mashiach. The ingathering of exiles will follow the construction of the temple. None of the major commentaries on the Mishnah Torah dispute this issue, despite the fact that certain Talmudic midrashic passages imply that the ingathering of the exiles will precede Mashiach's coming. From this point onward, his identity can no longer be disputed. Once he has accomplished these achievements, we can be certain that the Messianic era will begin. So anyone that we suspect might be the Mashiach could be potentially, if he gets killed and didn't achieve the goals, then we can say, well, I guess no matter what potential we thought he had, since he didn't achieve the goals, that's not him. he will then improve the entire world, motivating all the nations to serve God together. As Zephaniah says, I will transform the peoples to a pure language, that they all will call upon the name of God and serve him with one purpose. Sounds pretty good. If he did not succeed to this degree or was killed, he surely is not the Redeemer promised by the Torah. Rather, he should be considered as all the other proper and exemplary kings of the Davidic dynasty who died. This passage does not refer to the self-styled false messiahs like Shabtai Zvi or Jacob Frank, but rather to messianic attempts supported by Torah sages, such as Rabbi Akiva's backing of Bar Kokhba. God caused him to arise only to test the many, as Daniel states, and some of the wise men will stumble, to try them, to refine, and to clarify until the appointed time, because the set time is in the future. Ever since the destruction of the temple, the Jews have yearned for the coming of Mashiach. The intensity of this desire has caused even our people's wisest men to err and to presume that the messianic age was imminent, although its appointed time had not arrived. Okay. I forgot about this part here. Okay. Hopefully, screen sharing will take you over here to where we can Sanhedrin 43a. Safaria should do. Going to be farther down before you get to I think this is where it is. Okay. Jesus of Nazareth, who aspired to be the mashiach and was executed by the court. The Jews did not actually carry out the execution for crucifixion. Crucifixion is not one of the Torah's methods of execution. Rather, after condemning him to death, the Sanhedrin handed him over to the Roman authorities who executed him as a rebel against Roman rule. So if you go up with the story in the New Testament, he was crucified on a cross, right? But look at what the Talmud actually says. Okay, when a person, we don't execute people by this method. Romans did that. We did. We have four ways that we could have executed: strangulation, decapitation, stoning, and fire. By fire, it was like a hot liquid, like a lava they would pour down people's throats. And they would give them something to make them delirious, so it's like instant, you know. So this is speaking about the crier must also publicly proclaim that the transgression was committed on such and such a day, such and such an hour, such and such a place, as perhaps there are those who know witnesses could have been in this place at that time, and they will come forward and render witnesses conspiring witnesses. So the crier is saying that a person has to go out, you know, they're leading the person who's been convicted. This is where it's saying the crier goes out before the condemned man. He's been convicted. He's on his way out to be executed after being sentenced. This indicates that it is only before him, while he's being led to his execution, that yes, the crier goes out. But from the outset, before the accused is convicted, he does not go out. The Gemara raises a difficulty, but isn't it taught in a Baraita? This is Mishnaic era literature, that on Passover Eve, they hung the corpse of Jesus, the Nazarene, after they killed him by way of stoning. And a crier went out before him for 40 days, publicly proclaiming Jesus the Nazarene is going out to be stoned. because he practiced sorcery, incited people to idol worship, and led the Jewish people astray. In my view, there's statements in the New Testament that pretty much say exactly this. To say there is no way to the Father, to Hashem, but through me, that's leading the people astray. God, we've always had access to, is now off limits unless we go through this individual. In my view, that's leading people astray. So this is saying that Jesus the Nazarene is going out to be executed because he incited people to do this. Anyone who knows of a reason to acquit him should come forward and teach it on his behalf. So, do we have any witnesses to say, on his behalf, to say we're getting this wrong? Anyone that can testify that this is not what he should be convicted of? And the court did not find a reason to acquit him. And so they stoned him and hung his corpse on Passover Eve. So, did the court have the power to execute? If so, did they do it by one of the ways that we did, by stoning? Or is the testimony in the New Testament that he's killed by Romans on a cross? It's pretty interesting, huh? So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. New Testament says that he died one way. Talmud says he was executed by stone. Let's get back. Hopefully you're viewing that we're back to Chabad's website here so you can see this online. Jesus of Nazareth was fired to be the mashiach and was executed by the court. That's the commentary that we just read. Jews did not actually carry out the execution of the crucifixion. It's not one of the Torah's methods. So I thought that was just an interesting thing to point out there. Okay, this was also alluded to in Daniel's prophecies. The vulgar among your people shall exalt themselves in an attempt to fulfill the vision, but they shall stumble. Can there be a greater stumbling block than Christianity? All the prophets spoke of Mashiach as the Redeemer of Israel and their Savior who would gather their dispersed and strengthen their observance of the mitzvot. In contrast, Christianity caused Jews to be slain by the sword. Okay, the Rambam lived before the Spanish Inquisition, and the most severe massacres perpetrated by the Crusaders. Nevertheless, even in his era, many Jews had suffered martyrdom at Christian hands. Okay, I think the main reason the Holocaust is brought up so often today is because it's the most recent. But as we see, if you go back in history, it's happened over and over again. So Rambam was 1135 to 1204 in the Common Era. He's the one writing this. Obviously, he knew nothing about the Holocaust, but again, people have the conception that it just happened once in history, World War II, but it's actually happened over and over and over again. Okay, their remnants to be scattered and humbled, the Torah to be altered, and the majority of the world to err and serve a God other than the Lord. Okay. Probably make more sense if we read this all again in one sentence. Again, I apologize for bouncing back and forth between the book and the screen. But can there be a greater stumbling block than Christianity? Christianity says the Torah commandments are done away with. You should follow that guy instead of just the God of the Torah. So we view that as a stumbling block for us. All the prophets spoke of Mashiach as the Redeemer of Israel, someone who's going to be our Savior, who would gather the dispersed and strengthen their observance of Torah and mitzvot. In contrast, Christianity did the opposite. It caused the Jews to be slain by the sword, the remnants to be scattered and humbled, the Torah to be altered, and the majority of the world to err, serve a God other than the Lord. The commentary there. This statement appears to label Christianity as the worship of false gods. That view is clearly stated in Hilchot Melachim 9:4. In some texts, that halakha reads Canaanites, but this that is a censored version. The original text reads Romans and refers to the Christians. There are other authorities who express the view that belief in the Trinity is considered as worshiping God together with an intermediary, which is permitted to the Gentiles. Okay, so this would be considered idolatry for us as Jews, but not necessarily off limits to Gentiles. So this concept that Christianity is so terrible that it's idol worship. For sure, it is for us as Jews, but it's not unanimous that it's idol worship for non-Jews. So there's some opinions that frown very heavily on this, but there are opinions that say it's not prohibited for non-Jews, and we're going to see Rambam um, speak positively about Christians here in a minute. But I just want to reiterate that again. Anyone that just thinks just because a person is Christian, oh, it's fair game to attack them unprovoked. It's not true. There's big opinions that say we should not be behaving that way. And we're going to see Rambam is even gonna say this, even though he feels Christians are misguided. Um, there's some redeemable qualities to the religion, which we're going to see in a minute. Nevertheless, so we're right here. Nevertheless, the intent of the creator of the world is not within the power of man to comprehend. For his ways are not our ways, nor are his thoughts our thoughts. The Rambam proceeds to explain that although Christianity and Islam appear to have produced negative effects, their rise was motivated by a subtle divine intent. Ultimately, all the deeds of Jesus of Nazareth and that Ishmaelite, here he's referring to Muhammad, who arose after him, will only serve to prepare the way for Mashiach's coming and the improvement of the entire world. Indeed, these faiths destroyed much of the paganism that existed throughout the world before their advent. Okay, so they deserve, to give credit where credit is due. Motivating to serve God together, as Zephaniah states, I will transform the people to a purer language, that they will all call upon the name of God and serve him with one purpose. How will this come about? The entire world has already become filled with the mention of Mashiach. The coming of the Messiah is a fundamental element of Islamic as well as Christian thought. So it wasn't necessarily us that brought the God of Israel to the whole world. There's billions of Christians and Muslims out there that are spreading this knowledge. Uh, Even though they may be a little misguided right now, Mashiach is going to come and show them the true way and show them where they were wrong for following Islam and Christianity. We're going to say, this is where the story that you've learned takes a twist. This is the true meaning of it. Make sure you can see on the screen the rest of this. How will this come about? The entire world has already become filled with the mention of Mashiach, Torah, and mitzvot. These matters have been spread to the furthermost islands, to many stubborn-hearted nations. They were true, but were already negated at the present age and are not applicable for all time. Read this again. How will this come about? The entire world has already become filled with the mention of Mashiach. It's a fundamental element of Islamic as well as Christian thought. Torah and mitzvot. These matters have been spread to the furthermost islands, to many stubborn-hearted nations. They discussed these matters and the mitzvot of the Torah, saying, these mitzvot were true, but were already negated at the present age and are not applicable for all time. That's the Christian position. Others say, implied in the mitzvot are hidden concepts that cannot be understood simply. Mashiach has already come and revealed those hidden truths. That's the Islamic view. When the true Messianic king will arise and prove successful, his position becoming exalted and uplifted, they will all return and realize that their ancestors endowed them with a false heritage, and their prophets and ancestors caused them to err. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 11. It doesn't flow so well when I'm trying to read from the book and make sure the screen is still in place where you can see that. So it's not the best way to give a presentation. So I appreciate you bearing with me. If there's an easier way to do it, let me know. Because I don't want to just sit here and read from the book. If you don't see the text, if you don't have a physical copy where you're watching to follow along with, but if I just go by the screen, then there's a lot of commentary we're going to miss out on. And I don't want to do that either, especially when some of this commentary is showing you how this has been edited. You're going to be missing out on what the actual manuscript says. So I feel we really need to have that included. So if there's a better way of doing it, let me know. So anyway, this is chapter 11, and next week we'll go over chapter 12. I'll probably try and record that one with somebody here that can follow along with the cursor to make it easier to read on the screen, or I can read the commentary, or maybe between now and then I'll figure out a better way to. We'll end that here.